Hi everyone! Today we'll be going over some basic how-tos and tips for developing your final drawings in Illustrator. In this video, I'll be showing you best practices when exporting your drawings from Rhino, setting up your interface in Illustrator, and some helpful tips on how to best manage your files and drawings. So let's dive in. Now when you're finished modeling in Rhino and you're ready to make your drawings, select your model and make sure that it is in a parallel or orthogonal view. So I'm going to select a isometric southeast view, which gives me a view that I'd like in a scale that I can actually put a scale bar in. And then from here, we're going to select this and type make 2D. I'm going to select the current view because I don't want necessarily all four views. I'm going to disable everything because I don't need hidden lines or tangent edges or viewport rectangle. Now normally you'll see make 2D visible or some sort of like pre-generated name. It's totally fine, just press OK. And now when you go to your top view, you should see the export right here. Now we're going to drag our drawing so that it doesn't overlap with any of our model. And we're going to give it its own space right here. Try to move your drawing so that they're not selectable when you don't want to select them. For instance, like if you're selecting your drawing and then you accidentally get a part of your model in there, it makes it messy. So you just want to get it in a nice, clean, independent region. Now you'll notice that I don't have a grid overlaid on top right now. If you'd like to customize that, you can use the show grid command, where you can actually take out the grid and the axes, and you can actually adjust the rest of your grid if you would like to adjust the parameters of that. So that's done. Now from here, we can either customize or refine our drawings in Rhino first, or we can just leave it all for Illustrator. So I'm going to create two examples. From here, now when you're making your drawings, normally you want to think about line weights ahead of time. So in your drawings, you'll have a series of hierarchy, starting from like your light, thin lines to your heaviest, which represent your profile or like the general outline of the shape. So I'm going to show you how to do this in Rhino first, and then I'm going to show you how to do it in Illustrator without worrying about any of this in Rhino. So for this example, let's go here. We're going to make a new layer called Drawings. And then within this layer, we're going to create sublayers. So we're going to have Profile, we're going to have Medium, and we're going to have Light. You should be able to represent the hierarchy with just 3 different line weights, but sometimes you might want to extend to 5, add heavy or thin. But generally, you want to keep it as simple as possible. It'll save you effort in the long run, and it represents that you're able to communicate your ideas with less, which is always helpful when you're trying to establish hierarchy. So for this example, we're going to actually change the color scheme of medium and light. So I'm going to give my medium, say, a blue, and I'm going to give my light a orange, and I'm going to give my profile a purple or plum. So all of these are in a different layer right now. So I'm just going to select the lines that I want to make my profile, and I'm going to choose Profile. And now you see the purple. I'm going to change some of these interior lines to be medium. And then I'm going to have some of these lines be light. So you can establish your hierarchy in Rhino. And the main benefit of doing this is essentially you are able to work on it in one program at a time. So you can save Illustrator for later, and you can work on as much as you can in Rhino. Now, while doing this, it is also helpful for you to create boards in Rhino that are the same size as your anticipated plots. So I'm going to create a rectangle, and I'm going to do a 3-point, start from here to 42 by 72. Now this is like a very typical plot size. 42 is usually the max that you can go in one dimension, and 72 is roughly like the height of the gallery boards. So it's a pretty useful or common dimension. Now we can drag both of these in here. Now these are 1-to-1. Now, if I wanted to make it scaled so that, you know, a ½ inch equals a foot, what I can do is use the scale command, select a corner, and I'm going to make it half. So now it's half equals a foot. Now, you'll notice that we're working in feet. So normally our mindset should be, well, we should scale it down further so that it's, you know, scaled down 1/12. You can actually export with different scale settings, so it's actually easier to just work with this in mind. Otherwise, this will be a very, very tiny part of your board, and sometimes you might have trouble looking it up. So it's actually very, better to just leave it as is. So remember your dimensions. What I like to do is I actually like to add a little line. I believe it would be 1/2. And that represents a foot in our drawing. So that's like a nice little beginning of a scale bar. Since I'm working in an elevation drawing, I don't necessarily have a north arrow. If you are working with a plan or something along the sorts, you have to make sure that you know what your north is. So be sure to add that. I'll show you how to draw one in Illustrator, but make sure you're able to determine the angle of north. Yeah, so from there, we should have everything that we need from Rhino. What we're going to do now is export this. To give a nice clean export, what I recommend you do is turn off every layer that houses some part of your model. And then we're going to use the move command. But before that, I'm going to turn on my grid so that I know where the center is. We're going to move this. I'm going to choose this as the point. And we're going to just type in 0, 0, 0 for moving. And just make sure it's on a clean C-plane. We're going to move the center of our board towards the middle. It doesn't have to be exact. And then we're ready to export. So now with this, I'm going to choose Export Selected. I'm going to select everything that I need to export. Export Selected. And I'm going to name this Board 1. Now, normally you might have a lot more content on these boards. I'm showing you a very empty board, but for the sake of this demonstration, just to make it easier, we're going to export that here. I'm going to add the word export because this is not going to be the file where we actually develop our drawings. So here, scale should be preserve model scale at 1 foot equals an inch. Choose CMYK always for color. RGB is only for digital applications. When you're using a plotter or a printer, there's 4 ink channels, and that's what you want to use. Export viewport boundary, I leave that on or off. It doesn't change anything, so I choose export. And now it will create a new file, which I can open in Illustrator. So if you zoom out, you should see that it exports, but this is actually the size, I think, of your last Illustrator file, so you can completely ignore the size of the artboard here. What's important is this. Now, it's because we exported close to the origin that it's centered on this Illustrator file. If this was exported, like, say, somewhere over here, in the far left, your export might actually extend past this darker gray boundary, in which case trying to get it out of there is actually a very big hassle. I think I can show you, yeah, this warning will appear. It's the worst warning. You just have to re-export closer to the origin. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to resize this window so you can see all of my properties. There we go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new Illustrator file for each of the boards that you want to plot. So in this demonstration, I only have one board. So I'm going to make a 42 by 72 inch plot, making sure my color mode is CMYK, and my raster effect is high. Pixels per inch just means how dense the amount of pixels are in an inch. The less pixels within an inch boundary, the more pixelated it appears. So we want to use 300. And that should be everything. We'll call this our plot. And now we're going to bring over what we just exported to our plot. Now the reason we create a new file is because this boundary is actually smaller, this darker gray boundary, than what happens when we create a new Illustrator file. So this is 42 by 72. So it gives you a lot more canvas space to work with, which is very helpful for us, especially as we continue to import a lot of drawings. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and before I paste it, I'm going to go to my layers panel. I'm going to make sure this option is checked on. So right now it's checked on. If I checked it off, I'm going to show you what happens. If I paste here, you'll notice that it just all goes to layer 1. Now this is a hassle, and it makes everything more complicated. If we check this on, we actually retain the layers from the other document, which essentially means that all of the settings that we've made, so light, heavy, medium, profile, they're retained, and so they're easier to batch edit. So if you actually edit this drawing in Rhino, you can actually select each of your layers from Rhino and just batch edit the properties. So say I have my profile line, now I want to make, everything black. So I'm going to select all 3 of these. I'm going to give it a black color. And now for my profile lines, I can change the thickness to be 1 point. Let's make it 1.5 so you can see the difference. And then for the light weights, which you can just select all the light line work, I'm going to give it a 0.5 line weight. And for my mediums, I'm going to give it a 0.75 weight. So you can see how you can quickly establish your the hierarchy and the appearance settings for each of the levels in your hierarchy. And that makes it very easy. If, for instance, if you didn't edit in Rhino, then you'll have your simple make 2D layer name here. Now what you can do is universally give this a thin line weight to start. Let's do 0.5. Now what I recommend you do is create a new layer called light, move everything there, and then select a line that you want to thicken. So I'm going to select this line because it's part of the profile. I'm going to give it a 1.5. Now we have this thick, dark black line. I can use the eyedropper tool by pressing I or selecting this icon and select this, and then I can, holding the Option or Alt key, thicken the other lines around it. Now once I have that selected, I'm going to remove this one just for the sake of demo. Once I have that selected, I can click on any one of those thickened lines and then press Select, Same, Stroke Weight, or any of the other settings that basically limit your selection to just what you want. So I'm going to choose Stroke Weight because this is the only time I have this 1.5 point line. So that selects everything. I'm going to make a new layer, call it Profile, and I'm going to use this little square icon here and drag it to the profile layer. And what this lets me do is I can turn off this profile layer and I just have my light lines, turn off the light layer, and then I'll have my profile lines. So you're basically using your layers to establish your line weight hierarchy, which will come in very handy when you have to batch edit the properties of these line weights. So I'm going to make another one. I want to make a medium. I'm going to choose something that I want to have the medium line weight. I'm going to give it a 0.85. And then I'm going to, using the eyedropper tool, repeat that process. And then select one of them, select same, stroke weight. I'm going to move that to medium. And so now everything is in its right place. Now what happens if there is a line that's not in the right layer? So for instance, this is a medium line, but what if I move this to light? Well, if I select any one of the medium lines, and then I select same, stroke weight, you'll notice that both medium and light is checked because there is a line in the light layer. All I have to do is move this to the medium, and then you'll notice that it's part of its selection. Now if I want to add a poche, what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete these extra layers that I don't need anymore. Oop. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to put it at the very bottom, and I'm going to call it poche. I'm going to lock all of the layers that I don't want to touch when I'm making this poche. And then I'm going to grab the pen tool. I'm going to make sure that I have a fill but no stroke. You can easily do that by using the swap fill and stroke. If, for instance, you have both, what you can do is select the stroke, press none, and then you'll only have your blue. So I want to use a blue poche just for the sake of demonstration. I'm going to start here, and we're going to trace over our drawing. Because we have the other layers locked, we won't interfere with the actual paths of those layers. And we have a clean, our own version here. And then once that's done, you can unlock everything else and you have your drawing here. Now when you add annotations, I recommend you create a new layer, name it annotations. And this is actually a carryover, our scale bar from our Rhino file. I'm going to move that over to the annotations layer, and I'm going to delete this extra layer 3. We have, this is our scale bar. So this is 1/2 inch, and it represents a foot in our drawing. You can easily create a scale bar just by extending this and then adding lines. This is like a simple scale bar. You can also try to find examples online and try to replicate that in Illustrator. So for instance, if you want to create the checkered design, all you have to do is create a nice rectangle and then fill it in like so. Of course, if this is giving you a problem, then if it's giving you a problem where it's like stuck to a pixel grid, you just have to go to View, and then snap to pixel and turn that off. And now you have ultimate free control. And then using Alt, you can select an element and drag it to create a duplicate of that. And now you have your checkered annotation grid. I recommend using a graphic scale indicator, only because while it may be accurate for your plots to have text-based like 1/2 of an inch equals a foot, it's better to rescale when you apply it to your portfolio to show a more graphic visualization, because it will actually scale and carry over. So when you're adding text, press T or select the type tool, and then you can add your text just by plopping it anywhere you'd like. I recommend small point sizes. I do not recommend that you go beyond 18 at all. And I use 10 to 12 for like small numeric annotations. So like anything that's on the scale bar here. This is 12 point. If I had a name for the drawing, say isometric southwest, this would generally be at 18. It's deceiving. It looks tiny on a computer screen, but when you plot this out, 42 inches wide is a very long measurement, and so it actually will appear appropriate. If you can read 12 point on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, you can definitely read it on a plot that's at 100% scale. And so that's all I have. Granted, this is not the only drawing you're going to have on here. Your boards will definitely be a lot more full. But what I recommend as you're working through your drawings is to make sure that you save a copy of each of these into a new file. And when you make these new files, under the Properties tab, selecting nothing but your artboard, if you press Edit Artboards and choose the size, Fit to Artwork Bounds, then you have an Illustrator file that is just the size of that drawing, which is very convenient to have. The only other thing that I would recommend, in addition to that, is when you're designing for your portfolio, you can copy your assets from these files, make a new 8.5 by 11 document, or whatever the size of a portfolio page of that document is, and then try scaling that document, or scaling your original drawing for this new document, and realize that what happens is your line work is also scaled. And so sometimes it'll be too thick, in which case you want to go to your layers, select your profiles, change it to something else. I usually use 0.75 for my profiles on my portfolio. My light and mediums become even thinner than that, so I'll have 0.3 for my mediums, and then 0.1 for my lights. And this is how it would appear on my portfolio. So there's a lot of things that you have to change. The other thing is you can have a there is an option to scale your line weights with your like as you resize them, like using this dragger. I actually do not recommend you do that, only because it will scale too small when you try to scale it down for something like a portfolio. In the same way that you're optimizing for your boards, you will eventually have to optimize for a page on your portfolio. And this is where having individual files that you can copy over to a 8.5 by 11 document that represents a page in your portfolio will help tremendously. So that's all I have. If there's anything else that comes to mind, I'll post another video. But this should help you get started with Illustrator. The key takeaways is layers, and then being able to select everything within your layers, and then make significant use of the select, same, and then finding a property. If there is a property that you want to keep for another drawing, there is something called graphic styles. And you can do that by going to Windows and then selecting graphic styles. And then you can save certain properties. So say you want to keep your profile line weights consistent across all of your boards. What you do is you choose a profile line weight, you add it, and then you save this. Now, I recommend doing this after you have all the line weights, but essentially now that you have that saved, say I want to go to a new board that is also 42 by 72, and let's say I had another drawing, but I'm just going to draw a simple line here, and I'm going to make it something wonky so that you can see what happens. So this is a 40-point line. I'm going to import, if I can find it, I'm going to import yes, it's under user defined, and I'm going to choose architecture. I'm going to put it over here, and then if I change this to a list view, I'll see what my new line weights are. So now I want to change this line to my standardized profile line weight. Click on this, and it changes the property to be exactly what it was. If you want to update your properties, you can always just add this to a new or actually, let me go back to this one. I'm gonna add thin, light, line weight. And then I can just replace that. And then when I load the assets, it should show up again. So now I have other line weights I can incorporate here. So I'm gonna change this to light. So that's how you can carry over your settings. Granted, of course, you can also just copy your entire drawing, paste it, and then copy from the properties of that old drawing. But yes, that's all I have. Hope you learned something new through this video. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at email by emailing me at edwkim@sas.upenn.edu. But yeah, that wraps the first tutorial. Thank you.